Ex-wife cheated, divorced me, after my brother's death, and now claims her child is mine. 3 years later. Alright, so I'm gonna use fake names and a throwaway account because I don't want anyone I know to find this. I'm Chris, 37 years old, and I work as a financial analyst. I've done pretty well for myself and have a solid career at a good firm. Family's always been super important to me, and I've been the responsible older brother for as long as I can remember. Growing up, my younger brother Ryan and I were really close, even though we were total opposites. I was the steady one, and Ryan was the wild child who couldn't say no to a good time, but that never messed with our bond. Ryan was always getting into ridiculous situations, but he had a heart of gold and was always there for me when it mattered. I loved him like crazy, even though he never seemed to take life as seriously as I did. Then there's Chelsea. She's 35 now, and we were married for 7 years. From the outside, it looked like we had a good thing going. No kids by choice, but we had a nice life together, or so I thought. Everything changed the day Ryan died in a freak motorcycle accident. I got the call at work, and I'll never forget how my heart just stopped. They told me to get to the hospital, and I drove there in a daze, praying it wasn't as bad as it sounded. When I got there, it was like a nightmare. The doctors said Ryan had lost control of his bike and hit a guardrail. He was already gone before the ambulance got there. They let me see him, but he was barely recognizable under all the bandages and tubes. They had to amputate both his legs. They were barely hanging on. I just stood there, staring, trying to convince myself it wasn't real. But it was. My parents were a wreck. My mom kept asking, "Why him? Why my baby?" And my dad, who was always so strong, just crumpled and cried while trying to calm her down. I felt like I had to hold it together for them, but inside I was falling apart. Chelsea was there too, holding my hand, saying all the right things, trying to comfort me. At the time, I was grateful. I thought she was a good wife. After Ryan's death, I shut down emotionally and threw myself into taking care of everything. Funeral arrangements, helping my parents cope, just trying to keep everything from falling apart. I didn't have the energy for anything else. The funeral was a blur. I stood by Ryan's casket, numb, as people came up to offer their condolences. I was too exhausted to feel anything, let alone think about how this was affecting Chelsea. I spent most of my time at my parents' house in the weeks after the funeral. They needed me, and I needed them. Chelsea tried to get me to come home, to talk about what I was feeling, but I just couldn't. My grief was this huge weight, and I couldn't share it with anyone, not even her. After a few months, I started to claw my way back to some semblance of normalcy. I went back to work, trying to get my life back on track. But things between Chelsea and me were different. We both knew it. The distance that had grown between us during those months after Ryan's death was like a chasm. I was so wrapped up in my grief that I didn't know how to fix it. I tried, though. I really did. I made an effort to reconnect with Chelsea, to get back to the way things were before everything went to hell. But she was different too. Distant, cold even. Whenever I tried to talk to her about what was going on, she would brush me off or change the subject. It was like she had put up this wall between us, and I couldn't figure out how to break it down. She started acting weird, on her phone late at night, going out more often, saying she needed space to clear her head. I wanted to believe her, but something didn't sit right with me. One night, a few months after I noticed her strange behavior, I was home alone and saw her phone buzzing on the table. She was in the shower, and without really thinking about it, I picked it up to check who was texting her. That's when I saw it. A message from someone named Mark. The content was explicit, to say the least. I took screenshots and videos of the conversations and saved them on my phone. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, but I needed to be sure. The next day, I hired a private investigator. It felt surreal, like something out of a bad movie, but I needed to know the truth. A few days later, the PI confirmed my worst fears. Chelsea was having an affair with this guy, Mark. They'd been seeing each other for months. When I confronted Chelsea, she denied everything at first, acting offended, like I was the one betraying her by going through her phone. But I wasn't having any of it. I showed her the screenshots, the photos, everything. She just sat there staring at the evidence, and then she broke down. She admitted it. All of it. She said she felt isolated and neglected, that I was too caught up in my grief to pay attention to her. She said she tried to connect with me, but I kept pushing her away. Maybe she was right about that last part. I had been pushing her away, but I never thought she would turn to someone else. I thought she'd understand that I needed time. She told me she met Mark at a bar one night when I was staying over at my parents' place. She said she felt lonely and that he was there for her in a way I wasn't. And one thing led to another. I didn't want to hear any more after that. Man, that betrayal was just too much. I ended up saying some really horrible stuff to Chelsea, accusing her of not being able to keep her legs closed, especially when I was mourning my brother. She fired back, calling me an emotional void and saying she couldn't reach me anymore. It got super ugly, and I just couldn't stay in the house with her after that. So I packed a bag and moved back in with my parents. They were shocked and more disappointed than anything when I told them what happened. Chelsea tried reaching out to apologize and explain, but I was done. There was no coming back from this. I told our mutual friends everything. I didn't care how it made her look. I wanted everyone to know what she did, maybe even make her feel some of the shame and pain she caused me. She kept trying to apologize, but I just couldn't forgive her. She destroyed whatever was left of our marriage the moment she decided to cheat on me. Divorce was inevitable. We got lawyers and things turned nasty pretty quick. We fought over everything. Money, the house, even stupid stuff like the furniture. Chelsea even tried to claim alimony, saying she deserved it because she was used to a certain lifestyle, but there was no way I was letting her take more from me than she already had. At one point, I found out she drained our joint account. She claimed she needed it to live, but I knew it was just another way to screw me over. My lawyer fought back hard, and in the end, we settled. I got to keep most of my assets, but the whole process left me drained emotionally, financially, and mentally. But Chelsea wasn't done making my life hell. She started showing up at my office, causing scenes and begging me to take her back. She'd cry in the lobby until security had to escort her out. It was humiliating. My coworkers, who used to respect me, started whispering behind my back. I even had to go to HR to make sure she'd stay away from my workplace. It felt like she wanted to ruin every part of my life. After the divorce was finalized, I tried to move on. I went on a few dates, but nothing felt right. I was too hurt and angry to start something new. My friends kept pushing me to get back out there, but I just wasn't ready. Instead, I threw myself into my work, putting in long hours and taking on extra projects, anything to keep my mind off what had happened. Slowly, I started to heal. The anger began to fade, and the hurt started to scab over. I knew I'd never forget what Chelsea did to me, but I was determined not to let it define the rest of my life. From what I heard through mutual friends, things didn't go well for Chelsea after the divorce. Mark, the guy she had the affair with, ditched her as soon as she told him she was pregnant. I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction when I found out. Karma, right? She struggled being a single mom, and financially things were rough. She lost the house and had to move into a tiny apartment. She tried reaching out to me for help, but I ignored her. She made her bed and now she had to lie in it. 3 years have passed since the divorce and a lot has changed. My career has taken off. I got promoted to a senior management position with a hefty raise and a nice corner office. I've started seeing someone new, Becca. She's kind, understanding, and everything Chelsea wasn't. We've been together for almost a year now and things are going great, but a few weeks ago, something happened that threw me off balance. A mutual friend of ours was getting married and I got an invite to the wedding. I debated whether to go, but Becca convinced me it would be good to show up, have some fun, and see some old friends. So I decided to go. I wasn't expecting to see Chelsea there, but as soon as I walked into the reception, there she was, standing by the bar. She had lost a lot of weight and had this sadness about her that I hadn't seen before. Our eyes met, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. Then she started walking towards me. She asked if we could talk, and against my better judgment, I agreed. We found a quiet corner, and she started telling me how hard things had been for her. She talked about how much she regretted what she did, how Mark abandoned her, and how difficult it was raising a child on her own. She apologized again, saying she knew she had no right to ask for my forgiveness but needed to try. She even started bringing up old memories from our marriage, the good times, trying to remind me of what we once had. It felt like she was grasping at straws, desperate to find some way to connect with me again. But all I could think about was the betrayal. As she talked, I had flashbacks to the day I found out about the affair. But then I looked over at Becca, who was watching us from across the room, and I realized that I had moved on. I wasn't the same person I was 3 years ago. I built a new life, found happiness again, and I wasn't about to let Chelsea pull me back into that dark place. I told her I couldn't reconcile with her, that too much had happened and too much damage had been done. I told her I was happy now, that I had moved on, and she needed to do the same. She tried to argue, saying she had changed and could be better, but I stood firm. I wasn't going to let her back into my life. She cried and started to beg, causing a scene. People at the wedding began to notice, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into feeling guilty for something she brought on herself. After the wedding, Becca and I talked about what happened. She was supportive, understanding, and didn't push me to talk about anything I wasn't ready to. I told her about Chelsea's attempts to reconcile, and she just held my hand and told me she was proud of how I handled it. Since then, Chelsea has tried to contact me a few more times, but honestly, I'm in a much better place now. So, I've been completely ignoring her because I'm not interested in reopening old wounds. I've set my boundaries and I'm sticking to them. I've moved on and I'm not looking back. But here's the crazy part. Last week I got a letter from Chelsea. In it, she told me she thinks her kid might actually be mine. She said even she didn't want to believe it at first, but the timing adds up, and now she wants me to take a DNA test. I'm totally lost on what to do. A part of me thinks this is just another one of her manipulative moves to worm her way back into my life. But on the flip side, if there's even a tiny chance that this kid is mine, I feel like I have to know. I'm pretty much stuck trying to figure out my next move. I mean, I never thought I'd be in this situation, and I seriously have no idea how to deal with it. If anyone's been in a similar spot or has any advice, I'd love to hear it. Thanks for reading, and I'll update you guys when I know more. Final update. Hey Reddit, it's Chris again. First off, a huge thank you to everyone who read my posts and offered advice. I was blown away by all the support and different perspectives you shared. It really helped me think things through during one of the most stressful times in my life. I'm back with the final update on this wild saga, and I hope it brings some closure to anyone who's been following along. To quickly recap. A few years ago, my wife Chelsea cheated on me while I was grieving my brother's death, and we went through a nasty divorce. I've since moved on and am happily with Becca, but recently, at a mutual friend's wedding, Chelsea showed up and tried to reconcile. Then she dropped a bombshell, claiming her child might be mine and asking for a DNA test. After that DNA request, I was super confused. Part of me wanted to write it off as another manipulative move from her, but the idea that I might be a dad was too big to ignore. I couldn't just brush it off. Becca and I had a long talk about it. She was supportive, but understandably worried about what this would mean for us. I tried to reassure her, but honestly, I was just as freaked out. I also consulted with a lawyer to make sure I was covering all angles. He recommended going ahead with the DNA test, but to do it through a neutral third party to avoid any accusations of tampering. We set up the test, and I tried to brace myself for whatever the results might show. The waiting period for the results was brutal. Becca and I felt the strain almost immediately. There was this unspoken tension every time my phone rang. Was it Chelsea? Was it the lab? Meanwhile, Chelsea ramped up her attempts to contact me. She constantly texted, asking if I'd heard anything, making snide comments about how I should prepare to step up as a father. It got so bad that I had to block her number just to keep my sanity. But even then, she found ways to get to me, like through mutual friends or even showing up at my office. I was already on edge, and her constant harassment only made things worse. My work started to suffer. I couldn't focus, couldn't think straight. It was like living in a nightmare. Then, just when I thought the stress couldn't get any worse, there was an unexpected delay with the lab. Apparently there was some mix-up and it would take longer to get the results. When I found out, I felt like I was going to explode. Of course, Chelsea took this opportunity to accuse me of tampering with the results, sending a barrage of nasty messages saying I was trying to dodge my responsibilities and scared of the truth. It was all nonsense, but it got under my skin. The stress was getting to me and I started snapping at people, including Becca. I could feel myself turning bitter and didn't know how to stop it. Finally, after what felt like forever, the results came in. I was at work when I got the email and couldn't even wait to get home. I opened it right there. And there it was, in black and white. I was not the father. Relief washed over me, but it was mixed with anger at Chelsea for putting me through this, sadness for the kid being used as a pawn, and frustration that it took so long to get to this point. When I told Chelsea about the results, she didn't take it well. She tried to deny it, saying the test must have been tampered with and accusing me of rigging the results. It was absurd, but she wasn't hearing any of it. She was desperate, and it showed. After a few days of back and forth, she finally seemed to accept it. But instead of apologizing, she just doubled down on her accusations. She started telling people I was a deadbeat, abandoning my child. Even though I knew it was all lies, it didn't stop her from spreading them. My lawyer advised me to take legal action to protect myself. We sent Chelsea a cease and desist order, demanding she stop contacting me and spreading false information. We also started discussing the possibility of a restraining order if she didn't back off. I didn't want to go that route, but it was becoming clear I might not have a choice. Predictably, Chelsea didn't take the cease and desist seriously. She continued trying to contact me and even showed up at my office again, demanding to speak with me. At that point, I knew I had to take the next step. My lawyer is currently working on getting a restraining order to keep her away from me, my home, and my workplace. It's not what I wanted, but it's what I need to do to protect myself. You could tell it was really getting to her. We had this long heart-to-heart the other night, the kind where you really open up. She actually admitted she was feeling super insecure and scared about our future. She was worried that the whole Chelsea mess was never going to stop haunting us. I totally got it and told her so. I reassured her that I was all in with us and that I wouldn't let Chelsea mess up what we have. But I also acknowledged that this has been really tough on both of us and that we needed to keep talking if we were going to get through it together. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it felt necessary, and I think it helped us both feel a bit more secure about moving forward. My parents were completely devastated when they found out everything that had been going on. They used to really like Chelsea, and while they were disappointed after the affair, the new level of manipulation shocked them. My mom was especially upset. She couldn't believe that someone we once considered family could sink so low. My dad, on the other hand, got really angry when I told him about Chelsea's accusations and the DNA test. He said he always thought there was something off about her, but never imagined she'd go this far. This whole situation has been hard on them too, seeing their son go through all this. They've been struggling to process it just like the rest of us. As for our mutual friends, things have been strained, to say the least. Some of them have distanced themselves from Chelsea, especially after hearing about the DNA test and her continued harassment. But others are kind of stuck in the middle, unsure of what to believe. It's been a tough situation all around, and I've had to accept that some friendships might not survive this. Emotionally, I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything that's happened, the betrayal, the manipulation, the stress. It's been a lot to handle. I never wanted things to get this ugly, but I know none of this is my fault. What's been especially hard is the guilt I feel about the child in all of this. Even though I'm not the father, I feel so bad for the kid. They didn't ask to be born into this mess, and they're the real victim here. I know there's nothing I can do about it, but it's something that's been weighing on me. In the end, I've decided to completely cut ties with Chelsea. There's no point in trying to maintain any kind of relationship with someone who's caused this much damage. I've blocked her everywhere, and I'm moving forward with the legal actions necessary to keep her out of my life for good. I'm incredibly grateful for all the support I've received from everyone here on Reddit. Your advice, encouragement, and even your tough love have helped me see things more clearly and make the decisions that are right for me. Thanks again, everyone. I'll keep moving forward, and I hope this post can be the end of this saga. Take care.